So guys, thank you very much indeed for the kind of the insight that you've shared with us. I think there's some really interesting points coming out of that. And the first one for me is that technology is to coin a phrase, is the backbone to marketing, the backbone to driving innovation across the business. But from a marketing perspective, Chris, I got the feeling, I may be wrong, but I got the feeling of there's not always complete synergy between yourself and the IT department about getting things done, about moving quickly. What are your thoughts? What are your true thoughts on that?
My true thoughts are...
Can't do that.
I think it varies very much, and it comes down to how you perceive the I in a CIO. Honestly, it's. I think that marketing is moving at a breakneck speed and wants to try new things. And the last thing in the world we need is to go to IT to say, I want to try this. Well, let's go and do a process evaluation of the security infrastructure associated with how we look after the data. Now, I get all of that, and I think it's, at the end of the day, if there is a data breach, his head, not mine. I get that. But at the same time, it varies from organization to organization. And I think forward-looking CIOs who are willing to look at, and often people look at core versus non-core, and they will often say, put non-core into the cloud. I would argue that your customer data is the very essence of your business, and as such, it's pretty core. So for me, it varies, to be honest, and sometimes I perceive frustrations of the relationship, and sometimes I perceive great, wonderful collaboration to drive things forward. But I need to get my job done.
Yeah, I think the collaboration is quite key. I think it's do you all want the same thing, right? And if you all want the same thing, and we've heard, especially if you're all working together, for the same objective, then I think it works very well. IT can be stick in the mud, but they're worried about security or how do I roll a network out and it takes 3 to 6 months to do this and do that. What we do, and I think what you have to do, is you've got to be quite agile, which means you've got to be very close to the business. So one of the things I did as a CIO is I went and learnt to be a recruitment consultant, because I figured I couldn't deliver the systems you need or the challenges unless I understood exactly what you did and how you did it. The other thing we do is you don't have to do a lot of this yourself. There's a lot of partners. So, the SAPs of the world, the Oracle of the world, they've all got the same challenges. They all want to move to the cloud. They all want to move to the social. So they're obviously, there's a lot of innovation out there. And I think your slide was brilliant when you put up all of that things in the marketing. You just take the CRM piece, you could expand that out. There's a lot of technology out there. So, I found, a lot of the mentality is we want to develop stuff ourselves, and that was one of the first things I did. Most of the organisations I've been into is actually you don't need to do that. Actually, you could be just a glue person. Just take this and then glue it together. Once it goes production, once you come out that innovation stage and say, right, I've got a brilliant idea now, I've got to get it into production. Yeah, then you've got to lock it down and worry about data and firewalls and all the other things. But that's an implementation thing.
Okay, that's really interesting. You're talking about the test and learn, as we would call it, test and iterate. Yeah. Jason, in your business, do you give a damn about whether it's the CMO or the CIO that has, or CTO in your case, that has the budget for IT? What's key for you?
I've got to be really careful because the CTO's in the audience. I want to say I don't give a damn about
Brilliant.
about Lucas's decision-making process. So we own it collectively. I mean, I know it's a bit of a cop-out, but Lucas's team is part of every other project that we're on. Problem solving, a lot of the solutions that we create for customers are about, can come from technologists as much as they can come from finance people. So Lucas owns that part of the P&L, but in no sense do we absolve ourselves from that's his responsibility. Okay. Can ask him about that. I'd probably have a better answer.
Well, I think there's very little things now that happen that don't cross. My point there was they cross the whole organisation. Yeah. We do stuff that, if I want to roll out, go into a new location, I have to worry about HR policies or how I'm going to pay people, collect invoices. You're crossing all of the systems. So it's very rare that, marketing can come up with something, we just created anything. If it's a website, they have their own developers. I'm not too hung up about how you develop websites or stuff like that.
See, that's a really interesting question, because this is something that we hear a lot from marketers, and I'd love the audience to come back on this. If marketers are saying they're really struggling even to get tags put onto their website. It goes into a queue that could be several months long. Anyone recognise that, or is that just me? Okay. Yeah, there's a few hands going up. So that agility about doing something and testing and learning is...
So when I joined S3, that was one of the first things. So my CEO said, look, you've got to sort out this marketing and website stuff. He said it takes us 6 months. So you looked at it, and again, they'd used in-house technology to develop their own websites with an in-house team that, well, before you do anything, you've got to write down the scope, and then we've got to do a spec. So we whipped that out. We put Joomla in as a platform. They've got their own CMS. They can add content. They can change languages, any content, and they've got their own webmaster and that. Where they come unstuck is when we want to productionise that, and that's when you've got to take it off and say, right, no, sorry, it's going to go into a 2-week hardening process, then it'll be industrial strength.
But that's part of the way of thinking about it, Richard, is that, you know, when you look at the slide that Chris presented about the multiple options, tagging is a great example. That every week there's a new thing you have to tag your website for. And so putting the question back to the marketers about what's the hypothesis that doing this piece of work that will move on for our customers, because often they tag it and they get more data and they go, yeah, kind of, so what, I've got more data now. And it's important making sure that's driven, that decision around technology you use is serving the customer in a better way. I think once you look through that lens, it makes all decisions around technology. I wouldn't dream of giving my marketing guys a bunch of resources just to play with at all times. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And because they're creative, they'll be building stuff, but everything's got to be done in a prioritised way and with a real hypothesis that's value for customers. Having resources sitting around just throwing up web pages and tagging for the next new data analytics package just doesn't make sense from a resource efficiency, I think, as well.
Wow. No, I was just listening, thinking to myself that as a CMO, I don't want IT basically tagging my web pages, and if I decide that I'm going to tag web pages, it is because there is a very, very important reason within my business function that I want to do that for.
Exactly.
So therefore, it's not a question of basically asking permission of others to actually do things. I want to be in control of what I want to do, and I want to do it when I want to do it.
But that's on the basis that your decision's always right then, Chris. You're the highest paid opinion in the business, therefore you have
That's why I work with you and I work with others.
That's why you have the mandate to make those decisions. I trust my team, there's 300 of us today, and it's growing 20% year on year. I trust those guys to make the decisions and stand by the data and fail quickly if they need to fail.
Right.
I'm not around to make the decisions for everyone. You can't scale a business doing that way. Therefore, our organisation looks at it slightly differently. We've got great people everywhere, more or less everywhere, and they're empowered to make those decisions, but they have to stand by them. If they fail, they need to learn from it.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Great, fantastic. Are there any, I'd like to open it up to the floor. Are there any questions? We've got some roving mics around. We've got a question over here.
It's for S3, really.
Oh, just one moment. We've got people on the live stream. We'd love it if you could just...
There you go.
Stand up and wait.
Hiya, it's for S3.
Yeah.
Is part of the problem a limited testing environment? Because that's what I always hear. We can't test this in a live environment. You've got a queue for that, and it gets absorbed.
To a certain extent, that's where cloud comes in. You should be able to know. If you've got it on the right infrastructure, you should, and especially if it's a development environment, you should just be able, that should be cloud stuff. You don't need, you know, it's very, in fact, we still have some on-premise websites, but the next phase of that will be, we're just going to push that out. There is no, if you look at the cost, there is no point in managing your own website infrastructure. You know, you just got to get rid of this stuff. And give them the right tools. And I think the same with data. I mean, data is, again, another classic where, you know, I said I own data. I mean, I police it and I make it available, but I don't have people mining the data or coming up with marketing decisions or sales or which office we should open next. We just give them the data and let them get on with it.
Thank you.
Good luck with that conversation with your IT department. Any other questions? Oh, we've got Dave over here.
Hey, so I'm interested in this survey about the emotional connection that clients have with B2B brands. And I just wanted to ask the panel whether that's reflected in your experience. Do you find that your clients have a greater love affair with your brands than the B2C equivalents?
Mm-hmm. Great question. I think, Jason, you focused on this a little bit in your presentation, where I think you used the marketing BS phrase.
This one drives me crazy, actually. By the way, you know, I run a marketing organisation at Match. If I think about the way I feel about my wife, and I think about how I love her, all those emotions that swell up when I get teary-eyed when I think about it, and then I think about Pedigree Chum, right, as a brand. We don't love brands in that way. This is a notion created by marketers to justify their existence and their way of life. The idea that you connect with inanimate objects in the way you connect socially with people is just an anathema to me. And I find it bizarre that people even bring this up, the idea you would love a brand. It's just not how we think about that stuff. We might respect them, we might think that they solve problems for us, we might be passionate about the utility they serve them, but love as a concept towards an animal, you need help if you love brands.
So maybe the use of the word love is inappropriate in this instance, and some people do really appreciate pedigree.
Any type of emotional connection, I'd suggest, is misplaced.
Yeah.
You can think about the utility that it serves for you. If anyone loves business insurance, go and shoot yourself. Seriously. But it's got to serve a purpose. It's got to be valuable to you. It's got to make sure that it's what you're paying for represents what you need it to do. That's a different type of connection with businesses, and I care passionately about that. But, get out and meet a few people if you're in love with Pedigree Chum or any brands like that.
So it's more about are you useful to your customer? Is it a utility? Are you adding value to what they're doing?
Absolutely.
Trust, respect, all of those types of things, but maybe not moving over a little bit further into
Critical,
emotion.
absolutely critical. The utility, the service it provides, the way that it makes your life easier, anything in that domain makes sense to me. But when you get into the emotional range and semantics around that troubles me greatly.
Okay. If it's okay, guys, I won't come to you on the emotional thing. I don't want anyone to get too emotional. We've got a question at the back here, and apologies, I should have said up front, when you ask a question, if you could just give us your name and where you're from, that would be great. Thank you.
Hello, Darren Barber from Mediacom, an agency, a supplier. It's a follow-on, so I'm not sure if I'm going to annoy you now, but is the emotional point actually more about brand of choice and preference, though, rather than, I think, because the way I read that, I read through that whole deck, and the whole point from my perspective was, if you can create that brand love, then you get people to choose you. Mm-hmm. Now, so I don't love Pedigree Chum, but I might love Pedigree Chum over another dog food brand. I think people do.
That choice between two dog foods is where you place your love and your emotional context.
Historically, that's what marketers have spent their whole time doing, is
Exactly.
making sure that people choose that brand over another one. But the point is, it has worked. You've probably got a preference. Well, I don't know. I have a preference of car brand that isn't down to the practical aspects of that brand's business. There is some love there. So I think the point is there's a brand of choice thing, mm-hmm. which I'm very interested in as to whether or not that actually plays out in the B2B space as well as the way it does in the B2C space.
Yeah, I was thinking years gone by, and we've got a couple of colleagues from IBM in the room where there was the saying you'd never get fired for buying IBM. Yeah. And there's, whether that's love or it's an emotional connection, it's more of a trust or respect, a quality thing. And I think those things are very important to consumers or businesses that are buying. Thank you for that question. I've got a question here from Debbie.
Hi, a question for the panel. It's Debbie Williams. I'm a consultant. How do you balance the challenge of companies over-rotating and focusing on quarterly sales targets and being quite driven by that versus bringing on new ideas, rethinking business, innovation, and driving that through the company? It seems to kind of conflict. And I'm wondering how, at your level, board level, you are addressing that within your own companies.
So from our point of view, I think, thanks, Debbie. It's good. From our point of view, we would never float our company. We think that's antithetical to innovation, and actually our culture is predicated on thinking long term about what we're trying to do and being innovative day by day. So I think it's a real problem for society. The big companies that do well and innovate, and the examples that people always give of Apple, they ignore that, quite frankly, because they've got the power and the expertise and quite clearly the economic ability to do that. But for most companies, it's an absolute pain. I've worked in companies, Last Minute was listed, and it was a problem for us. You got to the point where your quarterly earnings were the only thing you were thinking about. So I think it's a huge problem that needs to be addressed long term. How? I've got no idea.
Lance, from your perspective, you've worked in big PLCs.
Yeah, we're PLCs. So at the end of the day, you've always got a budget, and you're judged on that budget, and your budget will move depending on how your organisation's doing, and obviously we're recruitment, so we're dependent on the economy anyway. But what I tend to do is a net model. So I tend to say, look, I've got a budget, I'm running IT, I'm going to get efficiencies out of that. If I move webs to cloud, I will get efficiencies out of that budget. I don't want you to take that. I want to take that and use it for innovation. And then use, because you can't manage innovation with a budget. You have to try things, see if it works. That will lead you down another path. You'll see if that one works. Some things won't work, you just need to kill them. And that will give you a new idea to go down to something else. So to try and manage that with a budget, you can't really do. However, the whole IT department has a budget. So I will have people mining stuff and people doing project development called R&D and do it that way.
Chris,
But-
you're sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Chris.
I was going to say that public companies, they have pressures, and those are quarterly pressures. Innovation is something that needs to be nurtured very, very carefully. And it is perfectly possible to have strong innovation within an environment where you have quarterly or monthly financial pressure. But you have to build it from the ground upwards, and you actually have to have it part of that. At Huddle, for example, having come into Huddle, we have an amazing engineering organisation, and they are under enormous pressures to build. But they provide Tuesday time when they give people the freedom to really try different things. And the comments you were making earlier about how people come together, innovation is something that you have to have a process to help it flourish. But it can flourish perfectly well, I believe, alongside those pressures.
Can I, on that, have a look at the guy I mentioned earlier, a guy called John Hagel. He came out of Deloitte, but he runs something called Edge Perspectives, and he believes it's impossible. So, it's actually, you get organisations that they innovate, and the only way of doing it is pushing it out to the edge of your organisation. Because by definition, if you've got the response to quarterly results and earnings, it's difficult. And what happens, he believes, is either the edge takes over the core, or the edge gets killed, and nothing in between. I think it's a really interesting way of thinking about it, because the example I think he was using was like Kodak. Kodak invented the digital camera in 1971, and they kind of pushed it on because they were going so well. And they had this part of their organisation. If they'd focused on that, then they could be the Instagram that was sold for $3 billion after 3 years, we all know. So I think that's a good example of parts of the edge either have to dominate the core, or they get killed, and he's done some good writing on that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Got one in the middle here.
Hi, it's Mark Hastings from BCSG. If CIO should own the data, marketing owns the hypotheses, who should own the analysis so that they're not marking their own homework?
I think it depends what you're using the data for. I think the problem we have in IT is there's always a lot of hype. So you get hype about big data, and you can take internet data and add it to your own data. As a PLC, the CFO is always concerned about the bottom line, so we have to give him. So he has SAP's business objects. He can query, his profit and loss to his heart content. The CMO may be concerned with SEO data, so he has complete control of that data and Google Analytics and what he needs to manage it. And our Salesforce managed by a different set of data. So I think each of your user in your organisation has different data demands, and you need to empower them with that data. So to me, when you look at data, even though I'm a custodian, it's actually protecting it, but the actual user has the data for their own purposes.
So Chris, you mentioned in your speech just very briefly about data scientists and how they're critical within the organisation. Would you like to
So certainly
elaborate on that?
from the point of view of marketing and this whole concept of big data, the ability to bring together and correlate the operational data in your back office systems with your social data, understanding who your Facebook profiles are, how they link into your in-store profiles, how they link into your operational profiles. Those are things that marketeers, if they can conquer that, they are able to better drive marketing programs that add value. And therefore, I need the ability to be able to do that analysis. And I need the ability to be able to understand that data. And I completely agree that when push comes to shove, you own the data. I mean, we have to be very clear that there is a very, very important need. And one of my beliefs is that when you work at an enterprise, you have a legally binding contract. It's called your employment contract with that organization. And it behoves you to take notice of that fact and not basically share information outside of the organization that puts that organization at risk. And as such, I'm very, very keen on the CIO working to ensure that we have the data safe, but I need the ability, and either it is with the CIO doing that analysis or it's on my own having the resources to do that through a data scientist. And I do believe modern marketing and the future of marketing, data scientists will be part of the marketing team to enable marketeers to be able to use data in a whole range of new ways.
Thank you. We've got time just for one more question if there's anything burning out there. Phil, can we just get a mic here? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Phil Jones, Managing Director from Brother in the UK. Perhaps I can add some insight to this. So I attended a CIO conference in London 2 weeks ago, so that's top 160 CIOs in the country. And for me, the root cause of all this is actually, a lot of it's to do with structure. So old traditional pyramid structure-based organisations create the silos. I've seen most CIOs think there's a technology solution for everything, and actually what they just need to do is go and sit in a car with a salesperson or a marketeer and walk in their shoes for a day or two. So when you talk about the big issues of shadow IT and all of these things that Lance will identify with, Lance is clearly in the upper quartile. I mean, that's why you've been European CIO of the Year. Everyone else has got their head stuck in the sand, frankly. And I've seen that with that community of people, that they are really, really struggling to move into the new. So I think what I've seen is actually new starts can actually start new. They can just go cloud everything, agile infrastructure, off we go. And then we've got, in the old world, companies that were based upon Microsoft platforms, SAP platforms, that are finding it very difficult to deconfigure that enormous Death Star of process and infrastructure to try and be as agile as these new starts. So it's only that, in my experience so far, the CIOs that actually sit on the board of directors actually get the things done. When they report to the CFO, it doesn't happen, because the CFO goes cost, minimizing, all this kind of stuff. When they report on the board, they have more time and space. So in my organisation, if push comes to shove and we have a top trumps moment, marketing will always trump technology, IT. Sorry to say, because we spend 7% of our revenues on marketing and 1% on technology. So when push comes to shove and we're in the room, JDI moment will be just do it, okay? Because if sales are under pressure, the CMO will be kicking my door in, and I'll feel that pressure. So I think part of that symptom is we've got to get more CIOs onto the board, working with the CMOs directly in order that they become a far more influential community in the business strategic goals, rather than just sitting down buried in a CFO's reporting line.
Fantastic. Phil, that's a great point, I think, to finish on. We need to promote our CIOs. Yeah, let's think about that over coffee. Very quickly, I'd like to thank the panelists and the speakers from this morning, so thank you very much.